I think I wanted to introduce our keynote speaker, Balan Subramanian. So Balan is fairly, new to us. Please, Balan. Balan is fairly new to, but he's not new to Microsoft. He's been with Microsoft since 2015. He's the partner director of Azure App Platform, right? Yep. With Microsoft, it's very difficult, right? With all the titles and designation, I need to double check. So he takes a lot of things that goes into the app platform. What I heard is this underlying core architecture. On top of that, you have everything sitting on top of that. Functions and logic apps and API management and everything is on top of that. So Balan is responsible for that. And with great pleasure, I would like to introduce Balan, who will take it forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Balan Subramanian. It's great to see you all here. It's been about a couple of years since I've traveled from Seattle to anywhere. So it's great to see you all here. It looks like we have my pre-COVID photo there, and this is the post-COVID me. And like Sarana was saying, it's my first time at Integrate. I'm glad to have this opportunity to meet you all and the folks online as well. As Sarana mentioned, I lead the product group for Azure App Platform. And through this presentation, you'll kind of see how we are bringing the elements of integration and application development together. We do consider integration to be a core part of modern application development, and that's the reason why we have all of this together in one group. So my team builds frameworks like Dapper for microservices, but mostly we're invested in building services like Azure API Management, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Cache for Redis, and a bunch of other services that help developers and integration specialists. So first, just some stats gathered from our friends at Gartner and Forrester. And interestingly, we do see a lot of this with our customers as well. So integration software market is expected to double by 2025. That's good news for all of us. And an interesting observation that we have is that enterprises will leverage multiple integration tools. So gone are the days where our customers pick just one product, and even if they're not using all the capabilities of the product, they were paying for the full platform. And what we're moving to is picking the best tools for the job. And this is very consistent with a cloud-native philosophy of, yes, you're building microservices and APIs, but you're also using the same philosophy when it comes to picking your tools. And yes, there is the cost of integration between those tools themselves. And that's our job at Microsoft, to make sure that integration is seamless between the different products that you use. And at the end of the day, you get to pick what you want to use. And a theme that you'll hear throughout the conference, and definitely in my keynote, is how important integration is to digital transformation. We hear about digital transformation a lot, but the core to that is having an integration platform that can support the different ways of digital transformation. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today as well. And the key thing here to remember is that most companies don't start from scratch, especially the ones that have been around for a while. They have existing systems, existing applications, and with digital transformation, they're not going to throw all of that away. They're going to leverage that as much as possible in building new experiences. And even companies that are starting new, application development through composition is a trend that we see more and more. So no one wants to reinvent the wheel. So integration becomes core to using existing applications, existing APIs, first party or third party, and putting them all together consistently so that you can deliver new experiences to customers. So let's step back and think about what is driving integration. So there is the need to modernize existing integration solutions. We spoke about, a lot of you still using BizTalk. And we don't want you to throw that away. We want you to be able to leverage that towards and modernizing your existing investments in that space towards moving into the cloud and towards leveraging the capabilities that the cloud provides, such as elasticity, the ability to pay for what you use, and the ability to be globally available. A big part of that is we expect this to be a gradual transformation. So we still see a lot of customers, big customers of Azure Logic Apps and Azure API IAM, have existing legacy systems that they have left on-prem or in existing data centers, but they're building the new solutions on Azure. So we think hybrid is here to stay, and that's something we want to enable through Azure Integration Services. We also find that the world is going more real-time. Consumers and businesses are expecting more real-time solutions, real-time access to information, APIs that are available, at the call of button, right, at the click of a button, and being able to leverage them wherever they are in the world. And with that, we see developers playing a pretty outsized role in digital transformation. And when we talk about developers, we use that more as a catch-all phrase to think about low-code developers, pro-code developers, and we think a core value of the integration platform is to enable the collaboration between them, to enable the collaboration between IT and integration specialists and the developers and business analysts who might be building applications on top of that integration platform. And with that, the responsibility of building secure, reliable integration solutions and applications is shifted left. So developers have more and more of a responsibility to think about those things when they're building the integration solution or building the applications on top. And we're taking an approach to enterprise iPaaS that we believe will meet customers' current needs and also evolve with them as they become more and more cloud native. Traditional and evolving messaging patterns are covered by Service Bus, Event Hub, and Event Grid. And with APIs becoming a more popular mechanism for integration, our API platform, the core job of the API platform, is to enable access to legacy systems and other newly developed microservices and making them available for further integration. Orchestration and cloud scale processing are handled by Azure Logic Apps and Azure Functions. And data movement is enabled by Azure Data Factory, which actually uses many of the same technologies under the covers. We are the industry leader in enterprise integration platform as a service. We are considered a market leader by Gartner for like 6 years running now, and by Forrester as well. And we see this in the growth of Azure Logic Apps and Azure APIM and the entire suite of Azure integration services, which I'll share some statistics later on. So let's talk about some of the key scenarios that customers are implementing and how we are enabling them on Azure. So application and SaaS integration covers solutions where you're connecting your applications, including legacy backend systems and third-party APIs. And when building integrations, an enterprise will largely start with line of business applications and existing systems that they need to integrate with. For example, they may have different delivery partners. They might have a lot of core functionality sitting in a legacy monolith system, or they might have all their ERP data sitting on a legacy system like SAP and SQL. And a good example of that is ABB. I won't go through all the details here. These are all case studies that are available for you to look at. But the key thing I want to call out here is how ABB was able to leverage their existing backend systems built on top of SAP and build new experiences on top of them to enable real-time access to information by service technicians. And the key thing that they were trying to enable here was better productivity. And for these service technicians to be able to interact with these backend systems hands-free. So they were able to build a Power Apps interface on top, make it available on mobile devices, on wearables, and so on, but still integrate back into their legacy systems. And they didn't have to go through a process of moving the entire system to enable this new interaction pattern and experience for their customers. And we have a session right after this to talk more about application and SaaS integration, so we'll go into a little bit more detail there. Another core part of integration is integrating services, systems, and people. People are often forgotten when we talk about integration technologies, but with Azure Integration Services, people form a core part of integration. Whether that is integrating people into the business workflows that you're building on top of AAS, or integrating the different personas or the different people in your organization who need to be involved in creating and operating those business processes. And APIs become a really important part of this, where a backend developer could create an API and make it available through Azure Integration Services to a front-end developer or a business analyst who's building the application in front of it in a way that is accessible to a wide range of people who would be using the solution. A great example of this is Coca-Cola building their community management system on top of AAS. So this is a really interesting case study where Coca-Cola, this was their first foray into B2C. Coca-Cola was largely a B2B company. And in this case, they were able to build a new Power App solution that enabled them to manage social events and automate payments for their partners, wherein somebody who wanted to host a community event would be able to submit a request to Coca-Cola through their Power App interface. Coca-Cola would be able to capture that into their ERP system, send it to their partners through the connectors and other integration capabilities of AAS, and have their partners actually meet the request, and Coca-Cola would handle all the payments through their payment gateway. The actual backend continues to be SAP. Coca-Cola was not going to change that. But what this enables is a new business model for them. Not a high margin business, but one where they're now able to get into a new area, servicing consumers, instead of just B2B partners. The third pattern that I want to talk about is real-time applications. And with the increase in online business, more and more customers want to be, more and more businesses want to be continuously connected to their customers. What that means is being able to handle event streams, run analytics on them all in real time, and being able to react to changes in data, whether that's coming from your own applications, third-party applications, or from your customers. And in these architectures, there is a strong emphasis on low latency to react to events on a source system. And this is where the benefits of the cloud start to show, because many of the processing capabilities are simply not possible on on-prem systems, but they are possible in the cloud. The ability to react to events quickly, the ability to process millions of events every hour, these are capabilities that are enabled by the cloud. DHL is a great example of this. Again, a lot of detail here, but the summary of it is they were building an IoT system where they wanted to automate the robotics in their warehouse, and being able to consume thousands of events per second through the IoT hub, being able to process them with other components in Azure Integration Services, also using our Stream Analytics capabilities, that helped them drive a lot of productivity in their robotics operations. And this is all built on core technologies that are available to everybody, and we expect more and more companies as they get into the real-time system space to be doing more of this. So why Azure Integration Services? As I mentioned before, it's a comprehensive suite of everything that you need to build traditional integration solutions and also cloud-native integration solutions. And it comes with the unmatched experience that we have in operating such services at global scale. For example, with API management, we are able to service 12 million plus calls with a 99.95% SLA, and very similar SLA for daily actions in Logic Apps and Power Apps as well. We have a very strong investment in security and compliance. This is where the benefits of running on top of the Azure platform come to play. So everything that we do in terms of investing in security for Microsoft and Azure carries over into these services that you would be using for your integration solution. And then we make it very easy for you to get started. So we have some really good offers that, and in our opinion, very generous offers that help you get started. And as you go through the process of taking your solution into production, there are other opportunities to save costs, which I'll talk about later as well. So with all of this, we've seen really strong growth in Azure Integration Services. Lots of numbers there. I'm not going to talk about all of them. But I do want to call out that there are more than 60,000 customers and more than 500,000 active Logic Apps today. And the volume that's handled by API management is just tripled over the last year. We have over 600,000 functions apps running on the platform, and more than 3x growth in Event Grid operations. So what we're seeing is across the platform. It's not like there are some services that are growing and others that are kind of stagnant. We're seeing growth across the platform overall. And in terms of the amount of data that's flowing through the platform, 1.7 petabytes of data flowing through Service Bus and Event Hub every day. But what matters most, and it's a metric that's not here, is how we are able to help customers in transforming their business and address their evolving business needs with Azure Integration Services. So to talk a little bit about that, I would like to invite Vikas from Asta. Vikas is an enterprise architect at Asta. He works on the integration and engineering domain. He is accountable for Asta's integration platform, architecture, and strategy. He enjoys tackling complex business problems and finding technology-based solutions for them. And he's going to share how Azure Integration Services has been helping them.
Thank you, Wally. Hi, everyone. Afternoon. So I've got very few slides. I'm going to talk about what are the benefits we achieved as Asda, who are embarking on a digital transformation journey, as Baran was mentioning, and what is our experience on using Azure Integration Services. So most of you know Asda in the UK, but those who are online might not know Asda, one of the leading online and supermarket chains in the UK, is embarking on a major cloud transformation. I wouldn't call it greenfield, and I was just thinking about it on the train. I would call it a blue sky transformation. So we have got nothing in the cloud, and we want to create an entire cloud-based operating model. So when we move our applications to the cloud, we do have to connect them, and we need something to build interfaces between them. And that's called enterprise integration. So I'm not going to talk about technical benefits. I will talk about what were the key kind of business level benefits we derived out of implementing Azure Integration Services as our core integration backbone. There is no other integration product. We just have Microsoft as our pure integration layer, enabling all our application connectivity between internal and external systems. So one of the key benefits we derived was implementing cloud-native solutions, not only just applications, but also integration, which is in a way an application by itself that connects them. So treating an integration as an application is a bit of a mindset, and that gives us, Azure Integration Services gives us that ability to design integrations in a cloud-native way, utilizing some of the serverless features like logic apps and functions, and some of the other platform as a service components like Service Bus, which are serverless in a way, but they do need to be deployed in your own account because they need like a storage account. So AIS enabled us to deliver all these cloud-native solutions in a serverless manner. So we don't have to worry about standing up large servers, trying to size them, which are the traditional problems when implementing an integration stack. The second biggest benefit I saw was the consumption-based model. That's the power of the cloud. When we decided to move into the cloud, we didn't know when we would move, how many applications would move when, how long will be that project. We didn't know. We had to choose an integration platform. And consumption-based model really allowed us to not to focus about what is our volumes like, how many interfaces we need to rebuild or redesign, what's the transaction volume the server needs to cater for, because it's all serverless. So we are not trying to focus our energy on trying to find out what's the optimal compute we need, rather on just building it. So that's one of the advantages. As you scale up your compute and you deploy new integrations on it, you will just pay for what you actually consume on the platform. And there are ways to optimize it. Azure offers quite modern tools to review your cost consumption and identify those areas where you can possibly redesign and save on cost further and make your process more optimal. The third challenge was okay, all these tools are there, but how do I enable the development team to actually deliver faster on these platforms and really move to cloud faster? So it's all about developer enablement. And, and that's something I'm going to talk about a bit more depth in another 2 slides down the road. So the concept I put in place was of integration patterns. So traditionally, when we talk about patterns, it's just on paper, and the teams have to just build it. But in this case, at Asda, I put in place a strategy where we just don't have patterns on paper. Rather, we also have underlying code templates behind it, which the developer can essentially pull from the Git repo, add in the business logic, and then deploy it straight away in the cloud. So it really empowers the developer to save that 20%, 30% of the time by starting not from scratch, but starting with that project scaffolding with some components already there. It's got snippets, it's got networking elements already baked in, so the developers don't have to worry about it from scratch every time. The final key benefit I would probably think that's worth mentioning here is agility. Microsoft Azure Integration Services is like Lego bricks. You can build whatever you want. You just need the imagination for it. That gives us the ability to respond to business needs faster. Something changes, COVID happens, we need to change some business process. We can tinker our existing integrations much faster and deploy it using the DevOps and CI/CD pipelines quite faster. So those are the kind of key 4 benefits that I saw that Microsoft Azure Integration Services has helped us with. Anyway, enough of all these benefits. I will now drill down into 2 of these integrations patterns I was talking about. So let's say we've got a scenario. We've got a legacy order management application which collects orders from customers from various sources. And we need to send it to our order fulfillment system. Now that might be on-premise, and we are implementing a new in the cloud. Now, those of you who might have worked in enterprise integration scenarios would know that generally there's no big bang migration. You would migrate in phases. You would plan your migration so you cut the risk. So the patterns are split into like a source pattern and a target pattern. So this is talking about a source pattern where you are getting a large traditional order file from your order management system. But your target system doesn't understand that file. You need to really build that integration. And that integration could be, if it's a very old mainframe-based system, it could be file-based again, but in a different format. Or if it's a more modern ERP system, which is API-enabled, it might be much more beneficial to use APIs to integrate that. But before we jump onto that stage, we first have to break this integration down. So the first step we have is receive that file on an Azure storage layer and drive your integration from it. Now, optionally, you could make this process real time, that rather than polling your storage layer, you can utilize Azure's inbuilt event grid, and your logic app can subscribe to that, pull the file in. Now, to connect to the storage account, you need credentials. So you could use Key Vault to retrieve your credentials and fetch the file, possibly convert into a standard. You might want to have your own order standard, so you might want to convert into a JSON. If it's a large file, you could utilize Azure functions, durable functions to really let the process a 1 gig file maybe, which a normal function might time out or logic app might time out. So you can offload that process to a function app optionally. So we have done that. this interface pattern then splits the file, large file, into each order. So each order will come into one single file and would place all those orders onto a service bus. Right? That's your source pattern that ends. Now, beyond this, that's where it gets really interesting, is that each order, depending on what product it's in there or where it's going, might be fulfilled by a different orderful ERP system. So how do we then route these orders to the correct system? That can be handled by a second pattern. So you could build two of those. You can have subscribers with filters, which can only pick the messages they are interested in, or that particular ERP system is interested in, and then apply your business mapping and transformation rule to really post that order into your ERP system, which could be an API. So if the ERP system offers an API, you could pick that message, perform the API call, you'll get an order number, you can park the order number in your application insights. We have built a framework where the developers and support teams can go and dig out a log for a particular message using a business correlation ID, like file name or order number or whatever might be most appropriate. Once the message is successful, we of course don't want it to go anywhere else. So we can mark it as successful so that service bus can essentially purge it. Now, if you have a second ERP system, you can essentially clone this pattern. I build a second subscriber, and really you're making it more modular, wherein you are routing certain order messages to your legacy ERP, which could be file-based, or it could be a direct subscriber to Event Hub, or maybe other legacy traditional technologies you might have already in your network. Once you have migrated fully into the cloud, all you have to do is simply delete this scenario and the subscriber. So that's all I kind of wanted to cover, just to give you a flavor of how we have benefited from Azure Integration Services, rapidly deploying our integration platform, enabling our developers, and really focusing on building these scenarios. Back to Balan. Thank you, Balan.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Vikas. So just to summarize, well, I have more slides, so this is not the end. But just to summarize what Vikas was saying, with Azure Integration Services, some of the themes that we see, right, better productivity, unlocking new business models. I have an example of that I'm really excited about. Being able to achieve secure systems and application integration, and being able to optimize your costs. We spoke about, being able to pay only for what you use, while at the same time, when you get to a point where you're able to predict your load, being able to get discounts in terms of the actual usage that you expect to have. All of this flexibility is enabled by Azure Integration Services. Just talking a little bit more about productivity, we spoke about how APIs can help your teams be more productive because they help you leverage what's already been built or what's already available in your organization, and how quickly you can build new customer experiences on top using the breadth of the Microsoft platform, whether that's the Azure PaaS platform, which supports various languages, or whether that's Power Apps, the choice is yours. And the ability to leverage the large ecosystem of 400 plus connectors, 500 plus now, and these are all cloud-based, so you don't have to worry about actually operating them, but you can leverage them out of the box, which also helps you save time. And the various serverless compute experiences that we have with Azure Functions. And finally, the strong integration with Azure DevOps and also with GitHub. These all lead to better productivity for your team. In terms of increasing revenue opportunities, this is largely because you can now build innovative and better digital experiences for your consumers faster with the platform. An example here is a fast food chain. I can't name the chain. We didn't get their permission. But with the onset of COVID, they were able to quickly take the APIs that you are using internally and make them available to partners for delivery, the companies that deal with delivery. And that opened up a new revenue stream for them. And they were able to do this in a matter of a few months because the APIs were already there. And API management was able to give them all the governance and all the capabilities to kind of, the dev portal and so on that enabled their partners to start using those APIs faster. And finally, in terms of optimizing costs, pay only for what you use, a wide range of pricing plans that are available, things like reserved instances that help you save costs, and then a very transparent pricing structure, right? Like there is no, call us to get your price. Everything is available for everybody to see. And then, of course, there are opportunities for further savings working with your account teams. Moving on, let's talk about the road ahead. And this is where I think most of you will find some of the things here interesting. So first one, the question on top of everybody's mind, what's happening with BizTalk? So let's talk about how you go to the cloud from BizTalk. As we've heard from multiple speakers here, there is never a big bang migration. The same goes for BizTalk. We don't expect customers to move all their BizTalk workloads onto Azure. We think there will be a gradual move, and for a long time, we expect to see hybrid applications that continue to use both BizTalk on-prem, Azure integration services, and our goal is to make them all work well together. So we've been spending quite a bit of time on this, and we spent probably the last 6 months talking to a whole bunch of customers through surveys, customer interviews, talking to MVPs like many of you here, talking to partners. And what we found was the biggest challenges customers have, it wasn't so much a resistance to moving to the cloud or modernizing their existing BizTalk setup. It was more around how do I do that? What's the architectural guidance for that? What do I do with my custom code where there's a lot of investment that's already happened? How do I get the capabilities that are available in BizTalk today in Azure Integration Services? And that comes to the parity question as well. When will there be complete parity between what I can do in BizTalk and in AAS? So what we did was we took these findings and created a strategy with very specific investments, which we will invest in over the next 6 months, over the next year, and so on. So as we think about the short-term investments, we're going to be working on patterns and practices, a little bit similar to what Vikas mentioned about the different integration patterns, but we want to make them available for everybody. We will have .NET Framework support in Logic App Standard. We will have support for BizTalk map assemblies. And we will also have Swift support in Logic App Standard so that some of the financial transactions that you might be doing with BizTalk today are also available in Logic Apps. In the medium term, these are the investments that we have. The key things that I want to call out, BizTalk Rules Engine support. This has always come up as a major issue for migration. So that's something we will support natively in Logic App Standard. And the migration tool refresh. So the migration tool has some really good pros, but it has some cons as well in that it's not able to handle all your existing data mappings. It only goes so far. So what we want to do is basically use the migration tool as a guidance tool and point you to the best practices and point you to the templates that you can then use on Azure to implement your BizTalk solutions. And finally, long-term business event tracking is something that we find BizTalk customers using quite a bit. We are taking some baby steps along the way there in terms of having a common observability pattern across the different components of Azure Integration Services enabled through Azure Monitor and App Insights. But to get full business event tracking, we're going to be working with partners and also investing ourselves to come up with an equivalent solution to what BizTalk customers use today. So now, switching over to connectors, we think of connectors as core to the Azure Integration Services platform. It's one of the capabilities that most of our customers use today. And one of the things that we've done is to enable your Logic Apps workflows and the connectors to run on the same compute. And what that means is there's better performance, there is lower latency, and you get the same security boundaries like VNet that you have for your workflows now applied to your connectors as well. We're also adding more and more built-in connectors. Our GitHub repo publicly lists all the connectors and when they are coming. By the end of this year, we will have connectors for Key Vault, for file systems, for SAP, AS2, and X12. We're also very happy to announce today the general availability of managed identity support for connectors. This relieves developers from having to worry about key rotation, and all of that is automatically handled by the platform. So with Logic Apps, some of the things that are coming up next, we're working on an updated workflow designer. You'll see some performance improvements in that. More importantly, some of the more difficult things in terms of using a visual designer for workflows, things like how do I handle exceptions, there will be advanced constructs in the designer to help with that. And it'll also be optimized for complex workflows. One of the common criticism that we hear is about designers being great for simple workflows, but not really working well for more complex workflows. So that's something we're investing in heavily with the workflow designer. The workflow designer, interestingly, is also already white labeled inside Azure. It's used by Power Apps, it's used by ADF, and we want to make it easier for our partners and our customers to white label the workflow designer as well. So if they are building a workflow solution on top of Logic Apps, something that they want to make available to their customers, they can leverage our investments in the workflow designer and carry them over. We're also working on a universal data mapper. It will have machine learning backed support for suggesting possible mappings, and it will also handle different kinds of formats, XML, JSON, and so on. All of the DevOps for this, we want to have a consistent story across Logic Apps, across APIM, and so on. And we'll be supporting both GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps. So you can imagine a scenario where you might have an existing Logic Apps and APIM solution that you now want to stand up in a different region. It should be as easy as deploying from a GitHub repo and being able to hydrate a blank instance of Logic Apps and APIM with the same set of policies and the same set of workflows that you already have running in a different region. And then we're going to incorporate some of the capabilities that you get today only with an integration account back into Logic Apps as well. One of the things that's become interestingly clear to us is with workflows, customers not only want us to allow them to build integrations, but they also want us to help them in building better integrations. So we are investing more and more in adding intelligence to the service. And what's helping us is the fact that we have the knowledge of more than 50,000 monthly active customers running more than 800,000 active workflows. So we start to see patterns from these workflows. And we have some history with this. My team also built the Azure CLI, where we were able to use machine learning to predict what a operator or a developer is going to do next with a CLI just by looking at the pattern of what they've done so far. And we've been able to show them examples of what they could do next based on what they've already done. And that's similar to what we want to do with Logic Apps as well. So with GPT-3, this is a model that Microsoft licensed back in 2020. And we've been able to use it successfully in a bunch of places, like GitHub Copilot, which actually does a really good job of parsing your intent expressed in natural language and being able to actually generate code in different languages. And similarly with Power Apps, being able to express intent in your language of choice and having the platform automatically create the Power App for you. Those are the same capabilities that we want to bring into Logic Apps, where, and this is a mock, it's not real, but we would be able to let you tell us what you want to do. And the goal here is not to replace the integration specialist or the developer. The goal here is to expand the target audience for Logic Apps so that a business specialist or a business analyst could leverage the integrations that an integration specialist or a developer has already built and made available through APIs. And this just makes it easier for companies to build more and more applications. I want to take a quick segue into APIs. This is familiar to everybody. So APIs are the way you take existing data and services and make them available for a breadth of digital experiences. And when we think about how APIs power the digital business ecosystem, it's by bringing all the different stakeholders within an organization together. And the integrations that we have, all the way from Visual Studio, VS Code, and GitHub, that targets the professional developer, to Power Apps, where end users get the benefit of the integration. The goal of our platform is really to bring all of this together and make it available across, on-prem, across Azure, and across other clouds as well. And as we look through what are top needs for our customers when it comes to APIs, API creation and design and API protection, that stand out on the top. So we continue to invest in that. The things that are starting to show up, API monetization, for example. And monetization doesn't always mean you have a revenue model behind your APIs. It just means you're treating your API as a product, and you're doing all the things you would with any other product. For example, you might have a product manager for your APIs. You might seek better documentation for your APIs, and all of that is enabled through the API platform. And finally, bringing together event-driven and streaming support in APIs, that's another area where we see growing focus. At the end of the day, we want to help organizations build this API flywheel, where by making it easier for developers to produce APIs and also to consume APIs, we kind of create that virtuous cycle of more and more APIs being created within organizations. And so far, our API product has been around management, but where we're investing now is to enable the full API lifecycle, all the way from designing and developing APIs. We're working on a partnership with Stoplight.io and Postman to enable that. And we have our own investments on that as well. A lot of this is just knowledge that we've gained by operating cloud scale APIs for Azure itself. Like pretty much everything that you do in Azure is through an API. And there's a lot of lessons that we've learned in terms of like API best practices that we're bringing into the platform. But another key part of this is being able to discover and consume APIs. That's been a gap in our platform, and that's something that we're addressing over the next 6 months, starting with the creation of an API catalog. So we're almost at the end of time. So I'm going to breeze through this last section a little bit. So we spoke about some of the investments that we're making in the individual services that are part of AAS. But there's also a lot of work in bringing all of these components together within AAS. So firstly, we're going to be working on a federated integration catalog. And what this will enable is a central place to inventory the APIs, the different message sources, the different event streams that you have in one place. So someone who is building a new integration solution doesn't have to talk to different people or go look at a wiki to find out what's available. They have one place to go look at. And then expanding the connected ecosystem that we have today into a true marketplace. And what we think this will enable, well, of course, it's going to help us save in the engineering costs of building and maintaining connectors. But we believe this will also enable new business models for partners and also enable customers to bring their own connectors into this marketplace. We have some history doing similar things with our Terraform providers for Azure. Where customers were building their own, and by giving them a place to share that, the whole community was able to benefit. And we want to do something similar for connectors as well. And in terms of having a first-class developer toolkit, we have individual tools and SDKs for each of the services. We're bringing them together and providing guidance on how best to think about developing against events, for example. That's actually where we are starting, where you'll soon see tools that help you define the shape of events, and also as a consumer, look at the shape of events and have the code auto-generated for you. And one of the challenges that we've heard is how today, Vikas mentioned it's like Lego blocks. And there are a lot of benefits to that, but one of the downsides is customers can't get a single view of all the components of their integration solution. And that's what we want to do with integration resource grouping. It's similar to Azure Resource Groups, except this is managed more along the boundaries of your integration solution. And finally, an integration hub, where some of the best practices in terms of how you use the different services together, in terms of, actually, I'll show you a quick screenshot of that. where you get guidance on using the different services and also templates on how these services should be put together for different scenarios. And early on, I mentioned how all of this is part of the Azure platform. And what we're building towards is having a single substrate that runs on top of our serverless infrastructure and also on top of Kubernetes, which is managed through Azure Arc so that it can be operated on any cloud or on premises for that matter. And we're putting a lot of engineering investment in running the different pieces of Azure Integration Services on top of the same platform. So the benefits of this are things like easy VNet integration. So you don't have to do product by product integration into VNets. You basically provision an Azure environment and you start running Logic Apps or APIM as part of that environment. And we also get common observability across all of the different components and common management across all of them. So that's what we're building towards. This is a little bit more long-term, but we already started working on, for example, Logic Apps runs on top of Functions, which runs on top of Azure Serverless. So we've already made a lot of progress here. And over time, you will see pretty much everything that you would use in Azure to build your integration solution and applications available within this one platform. So to summarize, businesses depend on all kinds of mission-critical application. And it's important that these applications can work together. When you can put them together and integrate them, you get exponential value out of them. And without a proper integration solution, this value is going to be lost. So the thing that I want to leave you with is really that integration is everything. We are at an integration conference, so it's no wonder we would say this. But there is a lot of truth to it, right? Because without integration, digital transformation is not possible. Cloud-native applications will not be possible. And it would be fair to say that integration is the backbone of modern businesses. So with that, thank you.
Covey.co